guys, welcome to the show. I know it's a little bit of a different background here, but we're making it work as we always do. We're gonna be back in the studio pretty soon. We're just waiting for it to finish getting remodeled and stuff like that. But like I said, welcome. We got a very, very special guest with us today, Mr. Jonathan Medina. Some of you guys might have seen him around social media, Facebook and Instagram. You know, he's going around traveling the valley, visiting all different types of high schools, motivating the kids, and he's been doing it for a while now. So if you guys recognize his face, that's probably where you've seen him. Welcome to the show.
Yes, sir. I'm excited to be here. Just finished my busy season. This past month, I was over in California, Atlanta. I leave to Atlanta this weekend, so kind of just excited to be home here in the Valley.
Yeah.
Also, even though I go all across the country, I still always, it's Christmas time soon,
Exactly.
so I got to be down here in the Rio Grande Valley.
So you always end it like around this time and try to spend the holidays with your family and then kick it right back off.
Well, I say I'm spending time with my family, but to be honest, this is when I start creating, like finishing my new books or filming courses. So this is kind of the time where I create, and then when I go perform, the rest is throughout the year.
Oh, okay. So let's just backtrack a little bit, go back into time a little bit, and explain to because my goal here is to explain the story of how this came about. You know what I mean? The day zero. So if you could just take us back to day zero, where you've never done any speeches, you've never spoken to anybody, and how everything just kind of fell into place for you, and what brought you here today.
Yeah, I absolutely love that, because people, they see, spoken to over 1 million people across the country, or they're like, he's spoken at Harvard and Princeton and all these Ivy League schools, but to me, that's the important part, is to actually go back to the beginning. I grew up down here in the Rio Grande Valley. I'm the oldest of 6 kids, so in my family there's Joshua, Jasmine, Gilbert, Jeremy, and Lucy, and then I'm at the top. My name is Jonathan. So grew up with all of them. I was the oldest. My mom, we grew up in a little town called Rio Hondo, and grew up there. My mom, she was a nurse, an LVN, so she would go, and I remember being a little kid and being with her. I'm sure it's illegal, but she would leave me in the car while she'd go take care of patients, and I would be in the car, and I'd make sure my brother didn't do anything wrong. But I always had this dream and this vision that I wanted to go to college. I wanted to play college football. I wanted to be a great athlete. I wanted to go to an Ivy League type school. So I had made it a goal since I was very, very young to have academic success. And so even though my mom hadn't gotten a real college degree, or no one in my family had ever gone to college, it was my goal that I was going to go to college. I even had an uncle who was terrible, but he'd be like smoking weed, and he'd be like, "Mijo, you're going to Harvard," and I was like, "Why are you smoking in front of me and telling me this?" But it was a goal of mine that I was going to have high academic success. And so since I was probably I think I was in 3rd grade the first time I did. We're here at the university. I'm seeing everybody cramming. I did my first cramming all-nighter because my mom, when I was in 3rd grade, was like, "No, you're going to be ready for the test tomorrow. You're going to do your project, even if it takes you all night to finish." It's like, okay.
For everybody that doesn't know, we're in final season right now, so everybody's cramming up, trying to get ready for finals and stuff like that. So, you're young, you got the vision, you see the goal, you want to be a football. So when did football start getting really serious for you? As far as when did you see hey man, this is getting real for me now?
It actually didn't happen until high school. So I was allowed to have academic success, but my mom did not let me play football. I have an uncle who has some back injuries. So my mom, she was like, "No, you're not going to play football." And I was bigger and more athletic than a lot of the kids. So all the kids were like, "Oh, be on my team, because it was like in little kids, you use But then when I got to high school, the reason I ended up coming back to the Valley, we had already moved to Houston, but I came back to the Valley because my mom got in trouble with the law. So my mom becomes incarcerated. My stepdad was already incarcerated before my mom. And so our family suddenly gets split. And so me and my brother go to Rio Hondo, or we all go to Rio Hondo, but among different family members. And my grandfather, he was a migrant field worker, so he didn't speak very good English. He didn't know how to read English very good. And so I got to make my own schedule. I got to do everything. And as soon as I got to the Valley again, I was like, athletics, I'm in. I'm playing football.
You're like,
Here, Grandpa signed this. And he just signed it, and boom, I got to play football. and I was terrible at the beginning because I hadn't played football. So even though I was big and strong, I wasn't very good at football.
All the other kids have probably been playing since they were like
little kids. Yeah, exactly. And so, and that's actually part of my speech. I always talk to the students. I tell them I got to play in 7th grade, and I was bad. I was on the B team in football and basketball. But it's not where you start; it's where you finish.
Exactly.
That's what a coach told me. So I was like, okay, even though I'm bad right now, my coach was like, you put a big letter B next to my name, or sorry, the other way around, B next to my name, but he told me, it's like, it's not where you start, it's where you finish. And so I was like, okay, every day I'm gonna come to school and I'm gonna work hard, work hard. Help that genetically I got to be, like I blew up into a big, huge guy, but there's a lot of other people who have great genetics, but they don't put in that work. And so
it's a combination of.
I was reading this thing the other day where it talked about, I think Coach Belichick said, talent is the ceiling, or talent is the floor, but your character develops your ceiling. And so I got with great coaches, great teammates, and they helped me to raise the bar on what I was doing. And so
the ball started rolling. You're like,
I'll say about sophomore year is all of a sudden it was like
growth spurt.
It started to. I'd already had a growth spurt, but it's when I started working out. It's like when I came into my body. So I like freshman year I was bigger than a lot of kids. I was maybe more athletic, but sophomore years were the combination of the physical gifts with hard work started to really blend. Sophomore year I went from freshman B team in basketball to sophomore year I was all Valley in basketball. Our team was ranked number 1 in the Valley and had an awesome year. A little school beating all the big schools. And then that was basketball. Football I would say was really going into my mid junior year was when that's when I took off from football.
No, did you play football your freshman year as well?
Freshman year, I did play football.
Okay, but like you said, it wasn't your.
Yeah, I wasn't committed to it. I wasn't good at it. My mom wouldn't really let me do it. So that was the year that my mom was in and out of jail. So I got to do it for a few months, and then my mom took me out.
So when did football become? When did it start? Like college? When did that thing start becoming like because down here in the Valley, too many people.
Yeah, and back then the internet wasn't. Now the kids can send their film on digitally. Back then it was like you had to make a DVD, send out the DVD. And so I would get phone calls because people would see, oh, he's 6'4", he's 250 pounds, he runs fast. And so I got to start getting calls from Stanford and Army and big Division I schools. Probably also because my academics were also great. So the schools that I listed, Stanford, Army, Ivy League, all the Division I schools that were recruiting me were also top tier academic schools because they can only bring in athletes that qualify also academically. Or they don't want to bring in a kid who can't handle the rigor of their schools.
Exactly.
And so the schools that were recruiting me were all top athletic and top academic. And so they started making the phone calls, I started getting mail, but it really helped to, even though I wasn't sure, no one down in the Valley was really getting recruited, maybe once a year someone would go play college football at the time. Now we have a good amount of kids that are doing it.
Yeah, it's getting a little bit better.
But back then I remember the phone calls, coaches would be like, I'd get a phone call from Princeton every single week. They're like, oh, we love you. And it was my number 1 school that I wanted to go. I want to go to Princeton. I want to be a Princeton Tiger. And so they'd call me every single week and the coach would be like, oh, I'm going to go to Houston. Can you drive up to Houston? And I was playing football. My grandfather was a migrant worker, so we didn't have the funds for me to just go to Houston just to go meet a coach. And so all we did was we waited to the end of the year and I sent out the DVDs and then they're like, oh no, he's actually terrible. Or some were like, we loved it. And I ended up signing to play football at Kingsville.
Oh, okay.
But when I signed there, I had an intent that I wanted to transfer to either Rice or Stanford after like a year of them building me up because I was a basketball player, so I hadn't really put on the weight like they wanted me to weigh. So
what position were you in?
I was a tight end. A typical tight end is about 250 pounds. At the college or NFL level, which I was 250 pounds, but most of the schools actually wanted me to convert to an offensive lineman. So I need to weigh about 300 pounds. So when I get to Georgetown, so I was I committed to Kingsville, but I told them, well, I'm applying to Ivy League schools. If I get in, I'm just probably not going to just show up. And so I signed with Kingsville. I don't get into Princeton. I don't get into Harvard. I remember crying at home. Burning all the letters that they sent me. I had a Princeton sweatshirt. I put it in the fire. I was a little bitter, but it was my dream and my goal, and suddenly, and I had a lot of people that told me that it was a bad dream and a bad goal. Unfortunately for me, I had a couple of different counselors in my life. So I had one counselor who supported me, Mr. Cortez. He pushed me. I give him a lot of credit. When I go and do trainings all across the country with staff, so I do a lot of trainings for teachers, I always bring up Mr. Cortez because he really helped me to believe that I could do it. But I had another counselor who told me, no, you really shouldn't do that. I had scholarship to go to Princeton for the summer, and that counselor was like, no, you shouldn't do that. Stay here, work in the summer, go to get a class at TSTC, which is fine.
Yeah.
But that's like such a rare opportunity. I should go take that opportunity.
Exactly. And you being young, you're just,
And so, but Mr. Cortez pushed me, so I kind of lean on the fact that he believed in me so much. There were times where I thought, man, I'm not gonna fill out another college application. I'm not gonna fill out this scholarship. And he'd be like, no, you can get it. To where I remember feeling so embarrassed. I didn't want to tell him that I didn't get into Harvard, that I didn't get into Princeton. I was like, he's gonna be so mad that I didn't get in.
And that's because those are like,
you're
shooting for the stars here. You know what I mean? So like, even if like, let's say, I don't know, I think Kanye West said this or something, like you shoot for the stars and then you fall, you still land on the clouds. So it's like your goals were so high that even like your next was just still.
Yeah, so I always tell people are like, how did you get to Georgetown? It's like, oh, I didn't get into Harvard.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
And my mom, as she would work in the nurse, there were all of these doctors that she would meet, and she'd wear like, I think I stole a sweatshirt from somebody because I couldn't afford to buy one for her, but I stole the sweatshirt and I sent it to my mom for Christmas. And my mom was wearing her sweatshirt proud around being a nurse. And all the doctors were like, why are you wearing a Georgetown sweatshirt? Oh, my son goes there. And all the doctors would be like, your son's in Georgetown? I wanted my kids to go, but they couldn't get in. Over and over, my mom, because she would travel from hospital to hospital, so she would meet different doctors all the time. Over and over, that story would happen. But
that's when she started.
My mom would have her like real proud moment.
That's when she started understanding, like, hey man, like this is actually a great school. So the football, when does it transition to, speaking? Because like I also want people to understand that it's like you have to really dig. Correct me if I'm wrong, but you got to kind of do a little self-evaluation sometimes and see what you're good at, maybe what you're not good at, and then pay attention to the things that are happening around you. Because I know we talked a little bit off air, and you said that somebody kind of introduced you to the whole speaking game, and you found out that that's actually one of your passions.
Yeah, so I spent a lot of time. I see you have a lot of books here. I used to read up as a student. I was in all the leadership stuff. I was instantly captain of teams, so I was having to speak all the time. Being that I was All Valley, team number 1, I was constantly being interviewed by the newspapers, by TV. So I was always on the spot, and I wanted to perform well. I wanted to represent my team good. So I spent time studying how to be a good speaker. Then it became college. We'd have our projects. We'd be just like all the students out there. Presentations, and it was always that I could see what was going on, and I would figure out how to explain it. So I always had the easy job. In group projects, they'd be like, oh, like we'd be talking about it, and I would start explaining what we were all doing, and everyone would be like, you're so good. Can you present? Can you present? And I said, okay, but I don't want to do any research.
Yeah.
And so I didn't have to do the hours of research as long as I got to present.
Which is
and so there's more practice and more practice. College, my job, I became a telefundraiser, so I raised $170,000 while I was in college for scholarships for other students. My job was to call and ask for donations. So I got good at calling and making those kind of calls. And then my first job after college, or I would say the first time I spoke to a big crowd, I was in college. It was a Christian athlete event, and they just put me on the spot. They're like, oh, can you be the college student that speaks tonight? Or they said this week.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay. And they're like, tonight. And I was like, oh, okay.
You're like.
And I remember getting ready to go, and I was set. I was like, okay, I know I'm gonna share, I'm gonna talk. And this was like the first time that I'm ever sharing a lot of my personal story.
Yes.
So where I talked about my parents were in prison, no one in my high school, I didn't tell anybody but one friend. I told him one time, he started crying, and I decided, you know what, I'm never gonna tell anybody again.
Yeah.
And so I would keep it a secret. People only saw that I was a top student, that I was a leader.
All the bright, good stuff.
But they never got to see the stuff that I was really struggling with.
Exactly.
And this is the first time I'm gonna share in front of the audience. And so I do it and I see how it impacted a little bit, but it still freaked me out, and I said, I'm not gonna do this again. 4 years or about 6 years later, I'm working and I hire a guy to come speak to students here in the Valley. I sponsor him to go to many schools. And while I'm driving around, he begins to share with me, or he begins to ask me questions about my life. And I just heard his story, I connected with it, and I was like, you know what, I'll share some of mine. One of the things that I talk to a lot of leaders about is that when you share first, it allows other people to share back. And so when you show your vulnerability, something that you struggled with in the past, maybe you're still struggling with, it allows people to share what they've struggled with. And so I share with him, and he says to himself, he goes, wow, that's an amazing story. My grandfather's a migrant worker. I'm working in the fields after school with my grandfather, but I still have aspirations to go to schools like that. And I went, played college football, walked onto the team there. So I kind of had like a Rudy style story where I walk on, I actually become a starter for 2 years. I still go and speak to the team every year. And so I do all that, and he said, that's crazy. Other Hispanic kids need to hear your story. Because he was a black man, he played for the New York Giants. He's like, I go speak all across the country, but there's no Hispanic men that are doing this.
Connect with.
And so it's like these young Hispanic boys, these young Hispanic girls, they need to see that someone that's Hispanic can do these things.
Exactly.
And so I said, fine, I'll do it with, he asked me to go with him to San Antonio. And so I go with him to San Antonio. After the first speech, I wasn't even good. I would probably hate myself if I saw that video from that time, but this one little kid comes up because I was Hispanic, he connected with me. He comes up to me and I shared my story, and this little boy tells me, he said, sir, can I talk to you? And I said, sure, the principal allows us to stay after the presentation. The little boy tells me how, he said, sir, my mom, she died 2 weeks ago. She died of a drug overdose. He said, I'm the second oldest, and after hearing your talk, I know I can be a leader in my family.
Wow.
And so in that moment, I was like, okay, it's not about me. I still didn't like sharing my story, but it's about the audience and what they need to hear.
Powerful.
And so from then on, I got better and better at telling my story. I now can, and if I looked up on Instagram, I take it very personal, so I actually respond to every single Instagram message. I read every comment, I'm responding, because later on, I had a little girl, she messaged me one time and she said, sir, my dad left when I was 2 years old. My mom became an alcoholic and she beats me and my brother. When I feel sad, I cut myself. She said, one day I told my mom I was gonna commit suicide, and my mom said she didn't care. But after hearing your story, I know I can still go and accomplish good things even if my parents don't support me. And so it's stories like that that just make me like, okay, it's important what I do, and so I gotta get better and better at sharing my message, get better and better at following up. You know, had I been one of the speakers who doesn't use social media, I would have never gotten to. I still follow that little girl. She's like a junior now in high school, and she's in cheerleading and all this stuff. I think she even has a YouTube channel. And, so she's done great. And I think, okay, I follow. You know, those stories help motivate me when you know, when I'm coming to December, when you know it's fun to be in front of the crowd, but it's hard to share those emotional things and share the things that I struggled with.
Exactly.
But those things give me strength.
And I think it's awesome how what I want people to really take away from this is like, it's not like you were born and you were like 11 years old and you're like, oh, I'm gonna be a speaker. You know, it's not really how it happens. You have to put in some type of, you have to get out there, like you said, you were out there, you went to San Antonio, you went to college, you were doing it, you were putting in the groundwork, you were in the dirt, you know what I mean, putting in the work. And as you start doing that, things start opening up, people start coming into your life. So if you could just, I always like to talk about networking and how that's important to someone in college like myself, you know, 21, 22 years old, mid-20s, maybe even 18, fresh out of high school, and how it's okay, like take a deep breath, you know, you don't got it all figured out yet, but you do have to put in some groundwork and shake some hands and go out there and, like you said, send out applications and believe that, hey, it's not unrealistic for you to think. I've heard this quote before, it's like, dream so big that, you know, you're afraid to share them with other people because of what they might think. You know, you just talk a little bit about how important it is to just put yourself out there and put yourself in position for success.
Yeah, and that's a big part of it is the networking thing. So the reason I wanted to go to the schools that I went to was because I wanted to be around the students who had worked so hard they could get into these schools. And I still to this day, I'm like, okay, my college football coach, he's having a golf tournament. Okay, I gotta go to the golf tournament because some of the guys that I play football with, I didn't take advantage of those relationships early on. So I'm like, okay, I need to be friends with them. Some of them, I have people that I know just from my class while I was in college. One of my teammates, he was Forbes 30 under 30. One of my teammates, he was just on Good Morning America the other day because he found his own cure for the cancer that was killing him. I have another teammate who, a lot of the people who went to Georgetown, I mean, my next door neighbor, he was a royal family, so he was like a prince. At one of my freshman year, down the hall from me, there was a Kennedy. So I always tell a story in my speeches, like when I graduated and walked the stage, that the king was watching me graduate. The Kennedys, there was like 40 of them, they were watching me graduate. And I wish I had done better at that networking back then.
Imagine.
I learned to be more strategic as an adult because, when you meet people, one, you don't know who they know, you don't know, and you don't know what opening each door. So when I meet you today, I have friends of mine that I'm going to introduce you to, like, oh, you should go interview my friend. And because I tell them that we had a great time here today, they'll probably allow you to interview them, or you could do something different from me. And so one of the things I like to share with students is when you meet people, tell people your goals. And so when I say, oh, hi, my name is Jonathan Medina, I'm America's #1 youth motivator. I help schools to encourage students, to engage parents, to equip staff. When maybe someday you're talking to somebody who, school board member, they're a principal, they're a teacher, like, well, you know what? You just talked about how your kids are not motivated. Well, I have a friend who's a top motivational speaker, and you'd be like, you can connect us. And so that can happen all the time. It doesn't have to be that you're a motivational speaker. It could be, we talked about some of the things that you wanted to do later, and it's like, oh, you want to start a business, you want a business consultant. You might tell me what you're good at or what you've learned and how you can help businesses. And then I have a friend who needs that help, and I'm like, you know what? I have the perfect guy for you. And so I've had so many opportunities where people introduce me. I become great friends with different people who, I'm like, how am I getting invited? I've had dinner one time just from like meeting one person to another person to another person, and then I'm at a dinner with some of the biggest important people in education in the country. I've been at a dinner table and gotten to be with like Arnie Duncan, who used to be in charge of all education for the United States, and who he was like good friends with Obama. So, I probably was like, I could have wiggled my way and got to meet Obama.
Exactly.
And it's just like little things like that, and I only got invited to that because of a classmate that I was friends with. Or another time I go to my friend's birthday party and I get to have dinner with Congressman Cuellar from like the Laredo McAllen. It's crazy. Like it's crazy because like a lot of times, you're in school, your school's important. I'm not gonna down that at all. So as you're in school, like you said, connecting with other people and the domino effect. So when I started this podcast, I was like, okay, I'm gonna start a podcast, but like, who am I gonna interview? You know what I mean? So I found one very good. So where I work, one of the development coordinators, I met him and he had good energy. We just connected, we just vibed like off, like just crazy, like one of those high energy guys, banging on stuff and speaking and like, he's like, so I asked him, I was like, Mr. Marcus, like, I'm starting a podcast. I had zero, like, I didn't have a YouTube channel, zero shows, nothing. I just said, hey, can I, would you like to come on my podcast? I'm trying to do like a personal development type thing and motivate some people my age. And he's like, sure, I'll come on. And it's exactly what you just said right now. After that show, he's like, hey, I got you Mr. Efren, I got you Mr. This. And so it just went from there. And that's when it hit me. I was like, man, if I would have just, like, it was like epiphany. Like, if I would have just done this so many years ago, it was like, it's almost the fear of like, what do you think it is as far as like reaching out to people, or the fear of like maybe rejection, or what do you think holds back people from doing what we're doing as far as like, hey, my name's Jonathan? There's definitely a fear of rejection. I know when I have to sometimes psych myself up, so I have to tell myself, no, I have a lot to offer. No, I can't help them, because sometimes I'm nervous myself, and it's a little bit of a fear of rejection. But I would say the more you get rejected, the more you get used to it, actually. So I remember doing those phone calls and asking for donations. At first I was terrible, got rejected all the time. But I would get a couple, like one person donated today, $200. And I was like, okay, cool. Oh, the next day, 2 people donated, $500. And then eventually I was having like $10,000 days where people were donating. Or one day I used to be afraid to talk to girls. And I had a friend who were like, we were just being silly. We're like, we're in the city, we don't know anybody. Let's just go have fun and like see what girls say if we are being silly. And we had opportunities where like the most beautiful girl would be like, oh yeah, here's my number, you were cool. And then the next one would be like, no, you're a loser, get out of my face. But then it became like a fun game for that to happen. So then it's like, okay, and same thing in business, or same thing when you're meeting people. Like, oh, those people look like they're having fun, I wanna go meet them. And you just meet a whole group of people, you have fun with them. Sometimes you were like, oh, you're a loser, blow off. But once you've had it happen a few times, that fear of the rejection kind of goes away. So one of the things that I always tell people is, if you're afraid to go meet that professor, if you're afraid to go meet a group of people, maybe you want to go apply to a job, go apply to some, and maybe you get them, maybe you don't, who cares? But just get in the flow of taking action. It's usually that first step is the hardest part. And so once you take that first step, you create momentum. Even if you fail, you've started in, so you're like, okay, I can go fail again at least, and you go do it and do it, and you learn like, okay, maybe I'll try this, maybe I'll try this. And so you learn new techniques, and it happens.
You ever look back like now and like, just like you're speaking in front of, thousands of people, I'm sure now, and you ever think back like, man, like how the heck did this happen? Like how, like, you know what I mean? How your story of like, your mom and your grandpa and all that, and now you're here speaking and you're writing a book. Tell us a little bit about your book, what it's about, and when did you start working on that, and where did you say, like, I'm gonna start writing a book?
Well, I have a bigger project of creating a student success curriculum.
Okay.
And so I had pretty much about halfway done, but the whole first part of my everything is starting with goals. And so it's like, okay, I'm halfway done with my whole student curriculum year program that I'm making. This stuff is pretty good, the goals part. So it's like, okay, that's good enough to make a little book. Let me just do that. And so I'd already done all this work, and I just kind of sectioned up a piece of it. Like, whoa, I'll just make a goals book. And so that's how I basically basically did it.
We're talking about goals. What do you think? How important do you think goals are? I know me personally. Somewhere one of these books taught me to write stuff down. I got a whiteboard maybe half the size of my apartment. And I literally write stuff down, I put it into ink, put it into the board. How important do you think just having a vision, having a goal is for somebody our age and going into college?
Well, for me, I'm a person of faith, so I'll say right now, biblically, it says, without a vision, the people perish. So I always go talk to students, like, if you don't have a vision for your life, you just kind of aim wonders, like, you're not going to have a place to go. But first thing we do when we're going to a place, probably your age, you've never been in a world where you were driving without a GPS. And so I have friends who, when I'm talking to students, they're like, oh, you're gonna drive to this place. You're like, oh, send me the address. Send me the address, send me the address, send me the address. You wanna have a final destination. And so then you know where you're going. If you don't have a final destination, you can drive aimlessly, you're never gonna get there. And so if we're going like from here to here, trying to get here and we're over here, we can go in a straight line, we're trying to get to that goal, but if we don't have it, we're just gonna kind of, maybe go here, here, here. You don't have like that direct path, or you don't know what are the best things. So if you have a goal of the podcast, you're like, oh, I need people that I need to interview, you need to find equipment, or you can spend this whole year without real goals, and so it's not gonna happen. I had a goal that I wanted to go to an elite university, and so I was like, okay, what does that mean? That means my GPA, I pulled up the books, I said the people who go here, they have almost a 4.0 GPA, or if you're in college, you're gonna get a job. There's certain jobs where people are like, oh, only the top students get to come work here. And so if you wanna go work there, you need to say, okay, my GPA needs to be right here. Or if I wanna work there, there's some people that maybe I know, and so you start looking. If you don't know them, you have to get to know them.
Yes.
And you look up things, you go on LinkedIn, you start searching, but if you don't have the goal, you're gonna just study the year, get your grades, whatever.
Yeah. What I like to share with people, I think my brother shared this with me. He's like, you're gonna fail no matter what. Like, no matter what you do, no matter how careful you are, because I correct me if I'm wrong, but some people out there, they hold back in doing big stuff because they're like, well, I'm not ready yet. You know what I mean? Like, next year, or like, I just need to do this, or like, I'm gonna do this first and then I'll do that. And they never get to the thing because they feel like they need to prepare, and I feel like it should be the opposite. You should just kind of jump into it. Why? Because you're gonna make the mistakes anyway. So it's better to make them early, soon, fast, because the more mistakes you make, obviously leads you in a better position. And we're talking about this, it's like you waste a lot of time. And so that's like the number one thing I feel is wasted, is time. I mean, we don't live forever, you know what I mean? And you get in there, you start shaking hands, start making mistakes, and start taking punches in the face, and you just keep going, and you get to your goal a little bit faster because you're not wasting time just waiting and planning. Because you could get stuck in like preparing, right? Like you can get stuck in like just preparing for the plan and never actually taking any action, right?
Yep, and it definitely happens all the time. I do it myself sometimes. You know, I was working my way towards that big book that I'll still finish that this year, but I was like, okay, this is good enough right here. Let me just throw out my goals book. Let me start giving it away for free, see how people like it, and then it helps me to have that other thing. But going back to the vision thing, one of my favorite quotes of a man named Jim Rohn. He's passed away. He was a mentor of Tony Robbins back in the day, but I still watch his videos on YouTube even though he's passed away. But he said, like, 5 years from now is coming. 5 years from now, it's going to happen. The thing is, are you going to be where you want to be 5 years from now, that you've designed it, you've taken action, you're on your path? Or when you show up 5 years from now, is it just where it just happened?
Exactly. One of my favorite, my mom told me this, it's like my favorite quotes, like, and all time. I was there and I was like, Mom, you know, I'm thinking about going back to school, you know? Thinking about going back. And she told me something I will literally never forget. She said, Mijo, whether you go to school or not, those 4 years are gonna pass by. Whether you choose to start today, those 4 years are gonna pass regardless. You know what I mean? Like, whether you choose to start or not. So in 4 years, when you were supposed to graduate, it's like, you could have chosen to start or not, but time is not gonna stop. You know what I mean? So I know a lot of times we're like, that's a 4 year, like, man, it's 4 years, or like, man, that's 2 years of sacrifice. Like, dude, that time's gonna pass whether you do it or not. Like, and when she said that, I was just like, man, like, everything just made sense after that. I was just like, it makes no sense not to start something, or a big project, or a book, or a podcast, or a YouTube channel, or anything that you're trying to do. It's like, it makes no sense not to start because the time is gonna pass by anyway, so might as well just get started.
And then you're using that time to elevate where you could be. So I think things like getting a college degree, like if you're down here, like, okay, you graduate high school, then there's everybody's graduated high school. Then you like, okay, some people go to college, and so then it kind of elevates you a little bit over them. There's like building your resume.
It's like a filter, like gets like funneled.
And so yeah, it's like funneling downward or funneling upward. It's just kind of like, okay, some people get a master's, or some people start a business. Maybe you start a business, even if it failed, you have the experience of, well, I started a business, or I started a podcast, I started writing books, I started reading books. And so you keep on elevating yourself to another better version of who you are.
Exactly. When did speaking, because it's full time now, right? It's what you do full time. What were you doing before? Like, what did you get a degree in, and what were you doing before?
So my degree was a degree in sociology, so I have to study, research the way society moves and does things. And so I really enjoyed the work that I was doing. And my university, they always talk about the cure of personality, so helping the whole person. So I had this Catholic influence from my university about helping people, doing the right thing, and, all the things that the Bible teaches us about faith and helping others. So my university was very interested in helping us to grow as individuals who are going to go help the world.
Okay.
So one of the things that I studied a lot of social justice, how to look at numbers, and how communities work. And so I did a lot of volunteer work when I was in college. So I always had this part of me that I was like, oh, I want to go help people. That was a big part of my life. I want to go help other people who were just like me. I want to help other people who are in need. And my university helped to create that. So my first job, I worked for the Fellowship of Christian Athletes. Okay. I help essentially the nonprofit. It's a big, huge organization, but that side of the Rio Grande Valley, the east side, had not really had someone that had been there for more than, no one had ever been there for more than 2 years. No one had created long-lasting programming, and so I spent 5 years doing that. When I was in those 5 years, I would go speak, I had to meet people, the networking, all the stuff we just talked about in order to create a good organization. So I had to go make a board. So I had to find people in the community who had influence to help oversee the organization. I had to find donors. I had to build relationships with school districts because a lot of our programming is at schools. I had to build relationships with coaches. I had to teach students. I had to train people on how to do it. So it was like a lot of leadership stuff that had been kind of preparing me my whole life. You know, all of a sudden it's being put together, and I'm seeing how, the networking that I learned in college. So my university or my football team, because a lot of us weren't going to the NFL or anything, they taught us a lot of how to network. They said, this is how you go meet someone, this is how you go follow up with them, this is how you write the email, this is how you shake their hand, this is how you look them in the eyes.
Yeah.
And so a lot of my teammates, they would leave and go get these six-figure jobs right out of college. That's what my school was preparing us for. And so I used those. FCA wasn't paying me six figures, but I had the six-figure skills that I was trying to apply to FCA, and so I suddenly took an organization where, I'm proud of my work there, so I'm super proud of it.
Yeah.
But, no one had really been developing it for that long. No one had spent 5 years doing it, and so we did some things that had never been done before. There were plenty of mistakes that I made. There's things that I'm not proud of while I was working there, but there's some things where I was like, wow, I can't believe we did that.
Yeah.
How did this person, but it would be like, meet this person, they teach me something, and now all together we build this team and it's continuing to rise.
I love what you just said right now. It's six-figure skills. It's like a lot of people might think that you graduate and the career at the end of it's the end. But how important it is to, just like you said, you're gathering information, gathering tips and knowledge and advice, and now we have YouTube. You know how it is, like YouTube, and I call it YouTube University. And it's like, what does that mean? And can you explain a little bit about what you meant when
Well, so six-figure skills. I definitely think there's certain things like learning to speak, learning to shake someone's hand, learning to follow up. Those are all skills that the top business people have, or if you want to be a great leader in an organization, you got to have those skills. Great communication, whether it be verbal, written, or email, technology, all kinds of stuff happens, or great leadership. Many students, they don't realize that, the experience of what it's like to create a podcast, that's preparing you for something later on, that maybe your podcast might become six figures, but it could be that you go into an interview and you're competing against all these other college kids when they're going to interviews at the same time. You all just graduate together, right? And so I don't know how many students come to this university, but you're all going to graduate at the end of a certain semester. And so now you're competing against all of them as you go into the job market. But because you started this podcast, you've learned communication skills, you've learned how to get someone to interview, you follow up with them. And so maybe you didn't have, this isn't a true job, but you have job skills. You learned techniques, ways to communicate. Look, we've been having great communication this whole time. You're gonna go put this online. You've learned to use the technology. There's a lot of things that you could sell yourself. And so you have these six-figure skills when you go interview for a job, and they're like, oh, what experience do you have? Like, oh man, I did this podcast. Oh, tell me when you struggled. Oh, I remember early on, we didn't have all the equipment. But then I learned to borrow it, I learned to rent it, I learned to use, I bought things, I had to invest in myself. And so now you have all this experience, you have great things to tell them compared to the other kid who was just like, oh yeah, I went to school, I graduated.
Yeah, because what happens is, we're talking about this, is what's happening now. It's like so many people are getting degrees. Like there's the market is flooded with people with degrees, it's sad to say, but I know buddies of mine who got degrees and they can't find a job. But because, in my opinion, they just don't stand out, So they maxed out in college, they did all the right things. They went to class, they got A's, they got a 4.0, they did all the right things, but they just don't stand out in the market, because how is it, like they got a stack of applications, right? They got a stack of applications, they're skimming through it, and you're 4.0, 4.0, 4.0, 4.0. Just doing something that will make you stand out from the market, right?
Yeah, and exactly the same. So I still interview for Georgetown University. Each year about 50 kids apply from the Valley, and about 3 or 4 are going to get in. So out of 50 kids who all have high GPAs, they've been leaders, I have to interview, and it's just part of the process. But I'm helping the university decide who's that person that stood out. And it might just be by the narrowest of margins. They all have great grades. They all have been leaders. They all have come from great families. Maybe some do, some don't. But they're all at this elite level. And so if you want to apply to these jobs that are going to pay you a high income, you know, the higher the income, most likely the more applicants are applying, or the quality of the applicants goes up and up. And so you have to find that little tiny piece that helps you go above the other person.
Exactly.
And so what it might be is the way you interact with them, the way you meet with them. You know, I teach, I get hired to come teach like interview skills to youth and or organizations. And I'll talk about little hacks that I've done. So I always say, I'll call it research, but I usually say, you know, Facebook stalk the people that are interviewing. You can find out ahead of time who's doing the hiring. You know, go to their LinkedIn and figure out what they're interested in. I watched this Netflix show, and the guy was interviewing for like some Ivy League school, and I don't teach to cheat, but the guy, he had already researched this guy's information and knew that the guy liked honeybees. And so he made it this whole fake story about how he also likes honey. Don't lie, don't do things like that. But
connected.
But you go in, so if I'm interviewing a student and they're like, oh, he played football, he does Cowboys, he travels as a speaker. Oh, if I have quotes that I'm posting up, you know, I follow Brendan Burchard, some of the stuff you have. If I'm posting Brendan's quotes, you might say, you know what, let me go read a little bit of the back of that book. So that way when I interview, for no reason, I'm just gonna bring up, oh, I noticed that you posted this quote. I wanna say, I love that quote. I read his book, and then we're like, I leave the interview and I'm like, you know, I'm gonna remember that person because, you know, they remember the quotes, they have the same books, they like to go hunting, fishing, whatever it might be that people like.
For someone listening and stuff like that, what would you say? Like, I know we got books. Let's say they want to get started. They have zero personal development books. They just want to pick one up. I know we have a few options right here. Maybe you want to pick one up. Maybe that would be a good starter for people listening that, you know, that you think that might be a good.
For me, definitely some of the people that I like to follow. So you have this person, Brendan Burchard. He's one of my personal favorites. He's a little bit nerdy like me, so I connect with his nerdiness. But awesome book, High Performance Habits. He also has a YouTube show where every single week he puts out a new personal development YouTube video. Some people that I follow that do somewhat similar things. So people hate riding in the car with me, friends who are like, oh, what do you like? We're gonna go on this road trip, and I'm like, okay, cool, I downloaded this book.
Yes.
And so I don't get to spend as much time sitting and reading as I would like, but that doesn't mean that I can't, through my ears, listen to the book.
I started doing that. I started, cause I would just music, and I don't know when it happened, I transitioned from music to podcasts. So I would go on walks, and instead of just jamming out to music, I would put on a podcast, and it's like, it would just put me in a zone, like a crazy zone. And we're about to get into 2020. We got podcasts, we got YouTube, we got books. Like, there's no excuse for somebody out there to be absorbing this information, right?
Yeah, and it's helped me to elevate my business. So I might read one of these books.
And we're talking about this one.
Yeah, I hate this guy. No, he's an awesome guy, Stephen Covey. So even like the 7 highly effective, or habits of highly effective people, we're talking about goals and vision. He says, think with the end in mind. So if my goal is to become prepared, all the people that are in leadership of the jobs that you're gonna get hired have probably read, this is like a classic book that everyone reads, How to Win Friends and Influence People.
That is like
These are like some of the all-time classics. And so you walk in and you see this, you'll see this on their bookshelves a lot of time. If someone's a leader, you'll see this on the bookshelf, you're like, oh, I just finished reading that book. What was my favorite part was this one. And all of a sudden, they see you as someone who, they're like, oh, I'm speaking to someone who actually improves. So even as I hire you right now with your current skills, if you're the kind of person that reads and gets better, or you listen to podcasts, I know that I'm hiring you at this level, but you're gonna get up to this level. Because you're the kind of person who improves. And so even though you're starting here right now, you can create that curve upward. Versus sometimes you hire somebody, and that's what I speak to a lot of people who own businesses, and they're like, oh man, I'm hiring the kids these days, and they all complain, but they're like, oh, I'll hire the kids these days, and they don't want to train, they don't want to get this done, they don't want to learn these things. If you show that you're different, if you show that you're better, probably by showing that you have connection, you read, you're like, oh, I stand out from everybody else because I may be, even if you're like, I may be even with them right now, I'm still getting better every single day.
Your ceiling is higher, yeah. So before we wrap it up, I always like to tell every single one of my guests, like if you were, you had a young person in front of you, and there was literally one or two things that you could tell them, just to, like, from your journey, from the beginning to the end, if you could just pick one thing, maybe one or two things that might be, like, you think might be the biggest difference for them, what would it be for someone out there listening? What would be your biggest, number one, I guess, a piece of advice?
So for me, I always start with the vision. So I always say dream big, have big goals, big vision. And so I would say dream big, and then you kind of create the path. So your dream is to go up there, and then you have to work to get to that point. So dream big, work hard. It's the classic stuff that they tell you. But find some people around you. Who you are right now doesn't have to be who you grow up to become. You can always be improving. So your education is, even if you're a college student, if you're a high school student, even as an adult, your education should not end when you get your degree, when you get your certificate. Your education should always be happening. I have people, whether they be mentoring me for free or whether I pay them to coach me, there's people that I'm learning from. I'm learning from their mistakes, so that way I can get to where they are right now. I can get there faster. There's people who have podcasts, who are like, oh, if I learned from somebody who already has a podcast, I don't have to make the same mistakes that they made early on. They're gonna tell me, they're gonna guide me, and that's what happens in every single great movie. Every great movie where the hero goes and does an awesome thing, often the person is younger. So they're younger, but they're gonna go do an amazing thing, and it's because someone comes in, a mentor, a coach, and guides them into the path. I started watching Star Wars, Luke Skywalker, Hans, there's that old guy that comes in and he tells him like how to become a Jedi. And so these older people come and they give you the path.
Wisdom, though.
Exactly. So there's wisdom, there's knowledge from all these people. These people get, I'm a motivational speaker, get paid thousands of dollars to go speak at places. These people got paid $50,000, $100,000 to go give 1 hour's worth of advice, but you have all of that right here. You can listen to it, you can read it, you can get that six-figure mindset, that six-figure skill, and you can create that path for you.
Hey guys, thank you so much for watching. Please hit the subscribe channel so that you stay up to date with all the latest episodes. Also, can you please give this video a like if you learned anything at all from the episode you just saw? Thank you guys. See y'all next time.